Alright everybody, entire process is there. So right now I'm just going to go ahead and complete the install. Before you do an install, you have to check something. Make sure the torque converter is seated properly, so you can turn and push, kind of wiggle it until it sits back as far as it can, and you would notice it's engaged now. It's no longer spinning free. Once you have confirmed that, then you can continue with the install. What I do on my end is I install grease right here and all the areas that are guides, just to help this slide in a little better. These cars are pretty tight fit, so the areas here that's for the guide doesn't really allow too much play, so grease does help. Also remember, you have 6 bolts for the torque converter, and you have to put these one back together. I'm going to be installing the 4-wheel drive system back on here. There is no gasket between it. I'm going to just bolt it on, and let's complete this install. I ended up replacing the shift lever because I couldn't take the old one off. It got bent, so I had to replace that. Anyway, let's get this going. All I have to do is guide it under the car the way I took it out, lift it up, and line it up with the engine. So when you're installing the 4-wheel drive system back on, it will get up to the transmission and leave the gap about an inch, because the shaft has to get engaged, and it doesn't work as smooth as you like it to be. So what you need to do is get yourself a mallet, line it up just a little bit, and then I would hit it. I hit it right here and it guided in just fine. I can confirm it's working. There's nothing stuck. After that, I'm just going to tighten all the bolts. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 bolts there. So since I got the transmission out with this mount on it, I'm going to put this mount back on. And I didn't fully tighten it. I just get a little bit room so I can move this around. And once this is back onto the subframe, I'll tighten it back up. So I got the transmission in just by guiding it through here. I got it lined up somewhat. So I'm going to try to lift it up, see if it locks in. Alright. Let's go up slowly. Okay, I'm just going to jack it up slowly. I'll have to move the transmission around a little bit to get to where it needs to be. Okay, so the hardest part is getting the transmission to clear that brace point, not touching this. So what I did is I adjusted the jacks so the transmission was more like this and like this. Now you can see the transmission is above that point. So let's jack it up. Perfect. And there's a bolt right here. What we're going to do is we're going to try to line up that bolt here. Make sure that lines up. So for this, I'm going to go down and adjust my jack to bring the transmission back to straight level, and then bring it back so the bolts line up. Then I'll push the transmission in and put the bolt. So what I'm going to do is install all the area, all the stuff that goes on right on top here, and then go down and complete the bottom end. I install the transmission cooler here, 1 bolt here, 1 here. Put the hoses back together. Next thing we need to do is install the bracket here that was holding the transmission bracket. So this is the lower brace for the battery system, battery holder. Just gonna hand tighten them first. Next we're gonna need the upper brace right here. Gonna go this way and like that. It lines up. All 4 bolts here. we go. There's a, we have 2 bolts here to guide the airbox in place. You have a little pin, you have to guide the plastic pin in place. Let's get the filter back in here. Airbox has the screen, make sure it's not damaged, because if it is, you might have to replace it or repair it if you can. Lock it in place, yeah. Plug in your mass airflow meter, and of course tighten that clamp right there. And this completes the top end. The battery's on charge. I'm not going to connect the battery right now. And then from here on, I'm going to go down and finish up the bottom of the transmission work. It's time to take out the transmission jack. Transmission is in place. And I was holding the engine in place because I took the transmission out. And there is only one engine mount. So let's take this one out. Looks like we got everything sitting where it's supposed to be. Now let's go work at the bottom. When it comes to reinstalling this axle back in, you have to take the axle out of the sleeve right here. The axle mount, you gotta take it out. There's no other way to get this axle back in here. And then after that, after you get that done, you'll be able to get the axle bolts back in, and everything else works out fine. So you have to remove this clip, take this bolt out. Of course, the axle is out already, because if you're working on the transmission, this comes out. And then to put it back in, you have to take the clip out, take the bolt out, put the anti-seize on both sides and inside the bolt hole. Let it sit for like a minute or two, then hammer around the corner like this. Let the anti-seize go around it, and then you're gonna hammer. You can see where I've been hammering. You're gonna hammer here, here, and the upper side, and the whole bearing comes off. What you need to do then is clean the surface inside. Sandpaper, clean the top of the bearing with the sandpaper. Very good. And then install the, guide the axle and the bracket together in here where they're not connected. Just the bracket is hanging out here, and then it's guided in. Then all you have to do is put the bearing in, hammer on this part while pushing the bearing in. It sits in, and then you can put the clamp and a bolt back on. That's how I got mine done. I'm just going to torque a couple of bolts and then install the subframe back in. To install the subframe, what I've done is I put a jack under there. But the front of the subframe is heavy because of the hub assembly and rotor, so I temporarily put a bolt on here. And what you can do is, you see the rack and pinion bolts already lining up. So at this point, what I'm going to do is lower the center of the subframe. Once you lower the center of the subframe, you can put a bolt back into the rack and pinion, line it up in the hole right there. And I'm going to slowly lift it up to make sure it is where it's supposed to be. So right here, I have to line up the rear engine mount. Also, line up the bolt here, and the back mount. This bolt have to be lined up. So I'm just gonna lift it up slowly right now, and I'll go back in here to guide the bolt. Lift it up again. Yeah, so you have to keep aligning that engine mount. It has a fastener here and stud in the back. You have to align the studs in the hole. Once they line up, lift the subframe up all the way and put the front bolts there. One bolt back there, front bolt here. Hand tighten it. Confirm your mounts and the rack and pinion is correctly installed. Put the bolt back in, tighten that, and then tighten the subframe. I got the subframe mounted there. and this bolt here. Finally got the hub assembly put back together the way it's supposed to be. Tie rod end is connected, sway bar link is connected, caliper hose running on top, bolted down. Now we're just going to connect the axle and the